A very warm welcome to Ms. Arthi Rajarathnam. It's a pleasure to have Ms. Arthi here. We can get answers from Ms. Arthi for which most of the parents are having. One of it is like the gadget addiction, where I think most of us as parents also, we are so addicted to the digital world, the gadget world, wherein we all wanted to update our phones. As parents, we are looking out for what are the new things coming up. So that's how we are addicted. So when you're looking into the child is also simultaneously addicted to the gadgets. So how do you feel like, how can we overcome as a parent as well as the children, because children are also getting addicted to it, when they need the gadget. Even if they want to have the food, they need to have a phone in their hand, wherein they need to swipe and get things, and it's taking more than 1 hour or 2 hours to have the food. And how do we cope up with all these kind of situations?
Firstly, thank you for having me here at Christ Kindergarten. It's always a pleasure to be back here. And when you talk about gadget addiction, when you talk about food habits, it starts from the way we train children when they're eating initially. So most children, when they're very young, they're not bothered about looking at the gadget. But as a parent, just to ensure that they finish eating fast, parents get them used to a screen, usually an animated video or particular nursery rhyme or something like that. And the child is very comfortable. Once they're distracted, it's very easy for the parent to feed them. But neurologically, we always use one particular term: what fires together, wires together, which means neurologically, when the child gets used to doing something and it is associated with another similar habit, over a period, the pathway is set in such a way that every time this triggers, this also has to trigger, which means it's not just about today, after the workshop, parents just remove the gadget and tell children, you stop gadgets, you have to start eating on your own. It doesn't happen that way. It has to be approached very systematically. How can a parent do this? One of the first ways to do this is that you need to, as a parent, introduce a lot of physical activity, a lot of play, a lot of recreation for children without screens. Because the moment you bring in a screen, the child almost moves into very typically addictive behavior where they can't function without a screen. When I say play, it must be a combination of outdoor activities where the child is very, very happy playing on a swing, on a slide, on different surfaces, working with groups, working alone, all of these things. So when they start having outdoor play, one of the biggest advantages is that they're creating new connections within the brain that can help them overcome whatever is addictive. But that doesn't mean the moment I do this, the child is going to be very happy going out and playing. What will happen is initially there will be a lot of resistance. They'll be making a lot of excuses. My leg is hurting. I'm feeling very tired. All of these things, because the gadget, what it does is it makes them become happy without putting in any effort. But it's not really happiness but excitement. At the chemical level, excitement is different from happiness. Gadgets introduce excitement, not so much of happiness. Having said this, once the routine brings in a lot of play and a lot of bonding with the parent, the child starts looking for options other than gadgets, right? So this is a process that may take between 21 and 60 days. Very often what happens is we want to start something, child will test our limits. How long is my parent actually going to stick to this habit? As parents, we lose that. We start making excuses, or one day we forget because we had some office tension, something like that. And the moment we break that habit and break that routine, the child goes back to square one. This is the first. Second, we'll need to also get the child interested in food. And this is very important because very often parents tend to make a lot of food, try to get the child to eat a lot. So to avoid that task itself, many children start resorting to a lot of diversion related tactics. So it's very important for parents to start with a small quantity, get the child to finish that and enjoy that meal time as a bonding. So you can use storytelling, you can have conversation. All these add to the value of the meal time. So then at that point, breaking the gadget addiction along with eating becomes much easier. But having said this, it takes about 60 days. It doesn't happen overnight because right from birth Till about 3.5, 4 years, you've given a gadget every time for meal. So child doesn't have an alternative. So it will take time to change that habit.
We also have this problem of when you say about the playtime, we don't have the grounds now, you see, and when you look into the flat culture, the apartments, people living in apartments, we don't have the space where the children can go freely. We are in a state wherein we can't even send our children to the neighboring house because of the fear, what would happen to them. So in that kind of a mode, how do you say, what do you say about the playtime? How can we introduce a playtime where we have a restriction of space in our homes? So what are the kind of play which you can suggest at home where we can get into them?
See, again, all this depends on individual children and their interests, and also the age range. Now what happens is, in the younger age group, especially in the kindergarten, they're in the age of fantasy. So they like to play doctor, doctor, teacher, teacher, and these will be a lot of whatever they've seen. Sometimes I've seen children even playing like cobblers, and they're very interested in all these things. So that doesn't require a lot of space, but it has a lot of responsibility from the parent to be able to encourage this and to enjoy what they're doing. So they'll play kitchen, they'll make something and they'll say, Papa, this is biryani, why don't you eat this? There'll be a lot of those things. And then you can add by saying, oh, I think there's very little salt, can you add a little more salt? So, make it interactional. Instead, as parents, we're like, okay, it's nice, now go and make something else. Child gets bored. The whole aspect of a child's play is in the excitement and the exploration. As a parent, when I also become interested and I'm excited about what the child is doing, they want to do it more. We need to show that interest. But parents should not be the only playmates. They need to have playmates of their own age group, because only then they're going to have a lot of interest in continuing. Otherwise, they'll get very bored with you, because you will just play into everything. But with children, there will be a little resistance. Sometimes they may play along, sometimes they'll say, I won't play. And that's the importance of all these things, right? And when you say shrinking spaces, yes, it's a universal problem. All over the place, we've built in infrastructural, we've talked about development in terms of infrastructure, but we don't have play spaces. It is important to have play spaces. But usually, at least in a city like Bangalore, as much as I've seen, there are small parks, at least in some residential areas. There is scope for children to be able to play. And even in our own school, if you notice, there is a play area. Parents can come in a little early, spend time, play with the child, and then take them home. Create it as part of the routine itself. Because, when we want to do something, we'll find a way. When we don't want to do something, we'll find an excuse. And I feel sometimes we are making more excuses than we are finding solutions for our children.
Also, just want to know, when the children are on the phones, they tend to, especially when they have access to the internet and when they're going to the gaming, and there are a lot of pop-ups of unwanted things which is coming up, which is also, I feel, it's going to hinder their growth in one way or the other, or get addicted to many other things with the gadget itself. So how to overcome all these things?
See, with any tool, you have an instruction manual, right, of how the tool works. In the earlier ages, I don't know if you remember, when we would use electrical objects, they would say, don't stand, bare feet, wear rubber slippers, wear an insulator. We always were given instructions on what is safe, how to enhance safety. But now somehow, because even as adults, we have not figured out safety rules for screens, we don't know how to inculcate it in our children, right? We don't know when to say stop, what is enough, because we've not figured it out ourselves. Having said this, I'd like us to have certain basic understanding. The internet poses several threats. One is of predators, pedophiles, people who shouldn't actually have any access to children. Second is of pornographic content, which is very, very dangerous again, because they pop up much faster than any other useful information. The third area is all these games where they interact with complete strangers and they don't know who they are because they're playing as an avatar. The internet always creates, you never play as yourself, you play as an avatar. So these are three areas which, as adolescents especially, there are a lot of issues. So first thing is, when it comes to predators, it's important for us as parents to always tell our children never to chat with or connect with anybody they do not know, not to friend or any person on a social media site who does not have a photograph that they know. So if I do not know the person, I do not friend them. This is the second rule. Third, they do not share any personal information of their location with anybody online. They are not allowed to share the location, because predators usually pretend to be a friend, pretend to be somebody known to the father, mother, etc. Child doesn't know. So unless the child personally knows, you're not connecting. But even better than that, have the internet access that the child has, like on a laptop, preferably not a handheld device which they can take away from the parent. Keep it on the dining table or in the drawing room where anybody can always supervise what the child is doing. This is very important. When it comes to pornography, just exposure to pornography, if we have open communications with our children, they will be able to say, Appa, this happened today or something like that, and they will be able to have a good conversation. Only when it becomes addictive, it becomes a challenge, right? So we'll need to draw a line between just exposure to pornographic content, which parents can have an open chat with the child, or pornographic addiction for which the child may need professional help. But the one that I would like to focus on, because it's the most common problem, is of gaming, right? Number one, whenever you're playing a video game, in my book I've specially mentioned it as mental toxin. What is the most dangerous thing about video games is that you don't play as yourself, you're playing as somebody else. You're already denying yourself an identity right there. Second, this gives you results or gives you points, winning points for doing nothing, for no effort, for just shooting somebody without even lifting your hand. You get like 13,000 points or 12,000 points. And unfortunately, in most of the games, you get rewarded for violent behavior and for socially inappropriate behavior, and very rarely for behavior that is otherwise acceptable. So for example, when you steal, you can score points. When you overtake on the wrong side, you can get points. When you kick somebody off a bike, you can get points, and so on. So you're subconsciously sort of training the brain to be okay with socially inappropriate behavior. That's a very dangerous aspect of it. Then what happens is, with gaming, at any level you fail, you can always restart. So it stunts problem solving in a very, very big way. Because in real life, when you face a problem, you have to deal with it at that point. You don't have a chance to reset there. Right? If you fail in a maths exam, you need to put in effort to be able to pass again. You don't get to reset and say, I'll rewrite the test. It doesn't happen that way. So these are the bigger challenges when it comes to this. And for this, one, parents need to restrict the internet usage. The Wi-Fi password, if it's being used, should be known only to the parents and given very specifically to the child, and removed, changed very often. Because very often parents allow free internet access, and like I had said earlier, it has to be in a space where it can always be monitored, and children must have consequences for the use of gadgets beyond a certain time. Personally, if you ask me, if there are no gadgets and children, especially in the teen years, have a lot of physical sport, it is very good for them physically, hormonally, and also emotionally, because there is a lot of outlet of emotion. Fitness wise also it improves a lot for them. But when it may not happen in some households for very practical reasons, we need to monitor gadgets by saying this is the only amount that you're allowed in terms of time, and you can choose whether you want to use 3 hours on Saturday or you want to use 10 minutes every day. You know, sort of give some kind of choice, so the child feels there's a choice, but actually the parent is in control of the whole thing. That would be the better way to deal with this.
I also have this question where, like, when we were kids, it was like when the parents say, do not do this, and we have a fear where, like, we generally don't do that. But the children nowadays, they're like, when you restrict them, don't do this or don't take that phone, they have the tendency wherein, like, they have to do it. That's a kind of spirit which they have. So it's a little complicated to deal with this, saying a no to them, and we don't want to hurt the sentiments also in one ways, but saying a no is also creating an issue with them. So how do we deal this difference of this generation wherein, like, we are living?
We can never compare the way we were raised to the current generation, because the challenges were different, the problems were different, right? Having said this, I think we were obedient more than really self-regulated, right? It was more out of fear than out of a need to understand or to learn or to, consciously make responsible choices. It was more out of a fear of a consequence. And I don't think that's genuinely a very, very healthy attitude to have towards life. But the problem now is also that we tend to overindulge and easily give children what they want. So at some point, they're not able to take no for an answer. And the other problem is, when I say no, when I say do not do something, and when I say no, they are two different things. When I say do not do something, the brain does not have a concept of do not. It has a concept of what should be done. So when I say don't watch that, the brain has to watch and then unwatch. When I say don't touch that, it has to touch then untouch. So there is a two-step thing. So as a parent, one of the ways in which we need to give instruction is tell children what you would like them to do. Instead of saying don't play with the mobile, tell them come, let's go outside and play cricket. It has to be a very clear communication structure, which is essential. Second thing is, obedience is not discipline. Discipline comes from self-regulation, obedience comes from fear. As a parent, what I need to do very systematically is to help children understand they can make choices and those must be responsible choices. And that is something that is developed over a period of time. So I wouldn't compare the two generations in that sense, because obedience is not discipline.